I never thought I'd be the one writing this, sharing my story with the world. My life used to be a picture of perfection. A job I loved, a wife I adored, and friends who would swear they'd never seen a couple as happy as us. But underneath the smiles, a storm was brewing, and I was too blind to see it. They say you never truly know someone, and now I believe it. This is how I discovered the double life of my wife, Emily, and the cost it inflicted on both of us. It started subtly, like all things do. I noticed small changes in her routine. Late nights at work, whispered phone calls, and unexplained absences. I brushed it off. She's busy, I told myself. Her career is taking off, and I should be proud. But the gnawing doubt settled in, and soon it began to devour me from the inside. It was a Thursday evening, the kind where nothing seemed out of place. I had just gotten home from work, expecting Emily to be home as well, but the house was eerily quiet. Her purse wasn't on the counter like it usually was, and her coat was missing from the hook by the door. I called her on her cell, straight to voicemail. That gnawing feeling intensified. I tried to ignore it, but something inside me snapped. I grabbed my car keys and decided to drive by her office, just to reassure myself. After all, she'd mentioned a meeting, but when I arrived, the parking lot was empty. Her car wasn't there. I sat there for a long time, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My breath came in shallow gasps, the weight of what I didn't want to acknowledge pressing on my chest. Where could she be? My mind raced with 1,000 possibilities, each one darker than the last. Then, a memory came back, something she'd said casually a few weeks before. "Oh, I've been meeting up with Claire a lot for drinks after work," she mentioned. Claire was her best friend, the one she'd always confided in. Maybe that's where she was. I decided to head to the bar where they usually met. As I walked in, I scanned the room. No sign of Claire or Emily. But just as I was about to leave, something caught my eye. In the far corner, nestled in a booth, I saw her. But she wasn't with Claire. She was with him. I froze, my heart pounding in my ears as I watched them. His hand was draped casually over her shoulder, his thumb lazily tracing circles on her arm. They leaned in close, their faces mere inches apart, as if sharing an intimate secret. And then, without warning, he kissed her. She didn't pull away. My stomach lurched. I wanted to storm over there, to confront them, to demand an explanation. But instead, I stood there, paralyzed by shock, my world crumbling around me. It wasn't the kiss itself that shattered me. It was the ease with which she reciprocated, the smile on her face, the way her eyes sparkled in a way they hadn't around me for months. I turned and walked out of the bar, the cool night air hitting me like a slap. My mind was in a daze. I drove around aimlessly for hours, trying to piece together what I had just seen. How long had this been going on? Who was he? Had she ever loved me at all? Or was our entire marriage a facade? When I finally got home, I was greeted by the sight of her car parked in the driveway. She had beaten me home. As I stepped through the door, she looked up from the couch, a smile on her face, as if nothing had happened. But I couldn't do it. I couldn't pretend everything was okay. "We need to talk," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She paused, her smile faltering. "What's wrong?" I sat across from her, the weight of my discovery sitting heavy on my chest. "I know, Emily." Her eyes widened. For a brief moment, there was fear, genuine fear, in her gaze. Then, she looked down at her hands, twisting the ring I'd given her on our wedding day. "How long have you known?" she asked quietly. "Long enough," I replied, my voice strained. "Who is he?" She hesitated, then sighed. "His name is Mark. He's someone I met a few months ago. It wasn't supposed to be anything serious, but it became serious," I finished for her. She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I never wanted to hurt you." Her words were like knives, each one sharper than the last. I felt my throat tighten. "If you didn't want to hurt me, then why? Why cheat? Why lie?" She looked away, unable to meet my gaze. "I don't know." I felt trapped, like I wasn't myself anymore. And then I met Mark, and I felt alive again. I'm so sorry. Sorry. That was it. Just an apology, as if that could erase the months of deceit. The worst part was, I wasn't even sure if I hated her. I hated myself for not seeing it sooner. I hated that I still loved her. Even now, we sat in silence for what felt like hours, the truth hanging heavy between us. I wanted to scream, to cry, to lash out, but all I could feel was numbness. In the end, we both knew what had to happen. There was no saving this. The trust had been shattered, and no amount of apologies could fix that. Our marriage, once something I thought was unbreakable, had crumbled in the face of betrayal. As I packed my things and left that night, I couldn't help but wonder if things could have been different. Maybe if we'd communicated more, if we'd paid attention to the signs, we could have saved what we had. But it was too late now. The cost of her cheating wasn't just the end of our marriage. It was the end of everything we once were. And that's a price neither of us could afford.